We're recording. You're listening to the Tune Up and Jam podcast. Ready? Go.
Welcome back, everybody. This is episode number 11, Tune Up and Jam podcast.
Tune Up and Jam.
All right, tune up, turn up, get down, and start jamming once again. Hello and arigato gozaimasu. It's the Tune Up and Jam podcast. My name is Rich. Here I am with the Diggem crew with Chris. Arigato gozaimasu.
Yeah, you too, brother.
And Francis on the ones and twos.
Arigato, say again?
Gozaimasu.
Gozaimasu.
And our star, Alexa. How are you, Alexa? Arigato
Good.
gozaimasu.
How are you? I thought you weren't going to do that anymore in the last
no.
podcast.
I am, but this is not hello anymore. This is thank you very much.
Got
Yeah,
it.
that was thank you very much in Japanese. And I had to say that because I just returned from Japan. So
Yeah.
So,
I'm dying. So just quick, I'm sorry. You got to let us know about Japan.
Yeah, enlighten us.
you know, the one thing that you definitely get immediately in Japan is how well-oiled of a machine the whole society is. You know, like I was in Tokyo and Kyoto, a couple of different cities, and Tokyo is a city of probably like 15 million people. It's like, it makes New York look tiny. Every street corner is kind of like Times Square. And so you can imagine the amount of people there. Subways, cars, street corners, everything like that. And you never feel that there's a jam anywhere. You know, not a music jam, but like a traffic jam anywhere. Everything just moves. Everything just flows. You never feel like it's just, like I said, it's just a big, giant, well-oiled machine. Everybody's got a part. Everybody, I think it was, what's that guy's name who does that food? Anthony Bourdain. You ever watch his show that he does on CNN? He does Parts Unknown. He called it like everybody's a cog in a machine, and that's exactly right. Am I pulling up really random references? This is
I'm curious. Are there a lot of street musicians
No.
that you see?
No.
Not-
No,
okay.
it's nothing like when you go to Europe.
Yeah.
You see them everywhere. You know, all the cities in Europe. I mean, it's just music. It's not like that over there. Not at all. You hear jingles everywhere. You know, like little kind of like, you know, J-pop type jingles, like coming from buildings or from billboards or whatever. But you don't really hear.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at Chris.
Well, I'm wondering, like, you don't see bands.
No.
Is there a lot of karaoke?
Yes. There
Fair
is.
question, though.
Like
Right?
every couple of buildings, and you know the way the businesses are, they're all stacked. Everything's stacked over there. So it'll say like first floor, second floor, third floor, and just about every other building it'll say like third floor karaoke. You know, first floor karaoke.
Well,
basement,
karaoke is
it's
like
everything.
a Japanese word, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think
It
so.
sounds Japanese to me.
Yeah.
Sorry
I'm
if
pretty
that's
sure,
offensive.
yeah.
to anyone. I don't.
No, I mean I think that's where it originated. So,
That's what I.
but
That's what I
and
think.
it is extremely popular over there. Extreme,
Yeah.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
Hey, Alexa,
yeah.
how you doing?
But
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Sorry.
not going to chime in on things I don't know anything about.
Yeah,
I love doing karaoke, so we'll leave it in.
I'm never afraid to chime in about things I don't know anything about. I'd
But
never
anyway,
talk.
Well, welcome back.
Yeah, it was. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back with you guys again.
Yeah.
So yeah, another episode. So
What do you guys feel like talking about?
I had an idea for. Well, I wanted to ask you guys something I was thinking about. What does anybody here read music? Anyway,
I read tab for
Tabs.
guitar.
well, that's. I mean, that's
I-
a way of reading music.
Yeah,
I guess.
that's-
Tabs, chord charts.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
I can read. I can read, but I admittedly I'm very rusty.
Well,
But yeah.
I guess the reason I ask is because I can, you guys can at some point, you know, but what are the pros and cons of being able to read or not being able to read? Because I think there's pros and cons to both. Like definitely being able to read, I feel a lot of cons and pros, you know, but
Really?
yeah.
I can't really imagine the cons, so I'm interested to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither.
The pros, the pros I think are pretty obvious because not only could you pick up a piece of music and just play it and get gigs that way. You can learn a lot of different things just by reading. You don't have to hear the music. Especially gig, I think important, especially in LA. And if you read music, it'll be a very, very. It's a good advantage to be able to do that because of gigs, the opportunities for gigs. You know, when you can, if we need to hire somebody, and you know they just lay some sheet music in front of you, you know, there's no problem if you can read. You know,
But
I can dig it, but I'm assuming you're thinking of the con would be the cats who can only read sheet music, who can't go to a jam and sit down and be like, hey, we're just playing in the key of D. Let's get down.
Exactly.
And they're like, hey, where's the music for it?
exactly. Like,
But that's separate, I think, from like reading music. I don't think is ever a detraction.
Yeah.
But if you are only a reader, that is a detraction.
I'm not a songwriter, but I think ideas. I mean, I read music. I started out on a trumpet, so I was able to read, the treble clef and all that music. I did that for 12 years or something, so I read pretty well. And but if I was only a trumpet player and then I tried to write music or anything like that, I think, and I also had studied theory and things like that. You get so pounded with all of these kind of, it's theory, so they're kind of rules, and these typical progressions and things like that you study, that you start to feel that that's the way it should be.
Right.
And so you start to kind of get boxed in, at least me, you know what I mean? I'm not a songwriter, so if I ever tried to come up with writing any kind of song, I think in terms of rules. Do you know what I mean?
Got it.
So I feel like I'm kind of limited in a way like that. And sometimes I'm not sure how to go outside. Like I'll have an idea in my head of maybe a song or something like that I'll maybe try to mess around and write. But then I'm like, well, it doesn't follow certain rules or something. And it feels kind of...
Well, we're kind of talking about a couple
in.
different things. You're talking about, because you opened this conversation up about reading specifically, and now you're talking about just music theory in general. So I kind of think...
Okay.
I think it's...
I mean,
know
in a way,
what-
they
I
kind
know
of go
what you're
hand in
saying,
hand,
though.
but
Like, I'm a songwriter. I wrote songs from the time I was 8 years old before I could play any instrument. So when I turned 15, it was, okay, now I should probably be able to accompany myself and put music to these melodies that I'm making up. And then my songwriting shaped from learning different chords and things like that. Like, if you ask my band, they just yelled at me the other day. They're like, you're not allowed to write another song using B minor, G, A. Like, you're not allowed to use these chords. And I'm like, well, that's like what my go-to. That's what I hear. That's what I feel comfortable. So there's this, like, had I been able to read music, maybe it would expand me in a lot of ways. But I've also heard the opposite, that you feel a little held back because you're like, oh, I know that this is the minor chord and it shouldn't go into the, seventh chord next or whatever it is. So
I look at it as it's just a tool.
right.
It's a tool to use, kind of like technology nowadays. I mean, people would come down real hard on technology, but it's a good tool to have when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you apply it to situations that are relevant and helpful, then it's absolutely a good thing.
Right.
But of course, if you're bogged down and you feel trapped inside it, then that's something else you need to, I guess, explore, in practice or other situations. But I think it's absolutely a good thing to have. I will never speak against learning music theory or reading, in fact.
No, me neither.
But it is one of those things that once you get into it, I can see what you're saying about feeling like you're boxed into these rules or just ways of approaching a particular thing, a particular progression, what scales to use over it. But then again, this is music theory. It's not it's actual law that you can't do something. But I think after years and years of music being around, these are the things that we have commonly accepted. Certain theory or certain parts of music theory are kind of like, yes, this sounds good to our ears, or this sounds a particular way that's aesthetically pleasing. And the only thing we're doing is just putting labels to it.
And we have to kind of put a tag on that and say Western music.
I was thinking the same
Yes.
thing. Yep.
Because you can go to many different places and their idea is a whole lot different.
Yeah, everything.
The
There's scales,
rhythm,
everything.
scales, the whole nine, which opens up a whole nother amazing range of things that you can do sonically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you got, some music in other cultures, they'll have tones that we don't even have.
Right.
They got those quarter tones and things like that. It just don't exist in our Western music.
But I think as a concept, I think absolutely it's a good thing to have. Treating it like a toolbox. you don't always have to use all the tools in your toolbox. You know, you can just pull out the ones you need for the moment, whether it be for a songwriting session, whether it be for a jam session.
You knew Francis was going to have a practical
analogy.
application.
Right, yeah.
It's your toolbox.
Listen,
Inspector
everybody.
Gadget.
No, no, and the reason why I say
No,
that
but
because
it's true. It's true. It's like the more you know, the more you can do with it. So if you're limited to a certain, you know, I've experienced it in songwriting, or even before I played guitar, that's already opened up a whole new world. Now I'm trying to get deeper into the guitar. That's changing the songwriting. So yeah, the more you know, it's never going to hurt you.
I've felt trapped the other way, where before I learned, and I did this the hard way. I didn't have, you know, a formal education in music. I did it, you know, the old school way of, you know, remember this thing called the library? And it had a music section. It had books on theory. And it's like, oh, well, I don't really understand this, but I'll kind of go back to it. And I'd get guitar mags and I'd read stuff. I don't really get things, but then I kept it around and kept going back. And then finally, when it clicked, it was just, you know, angels singing. It was great. But before I really understood things, there were times where I felt trapped or I felt the wall. It's like, well, I only know this and I only know this. Well, what could I do? You know, and then when I started learning theory, it's like, well, okay, try this progression, try this, and you start opening up all these different colors, you know, colors of sound. It was like, oh, this is amazing. And you don't have to go to it if you don't need to, but it'll definitely save you in many situations.
So were you, when you were learning, you were learning theory and like learning how to read like chord charts? Or is that what you felt trapped by? You couldn't like read chord charts? You didn't know how the theory worked along with reading the chord charts, or like what was it you were exactly trapped?
I didn't know why things were what they were. Like, for example, I think I learned to read before I fully understood the theory. For example, I knew that the black dots on the page meant this note, meant you put your finger here on, you know, the guitar or the piano. This is what you do. Now, why? You know, why isn't this key? Why is this a minor chord? Why is it a diminished chord? Why all these things? I had no clue. All I knew was this is what the dots on the page told me to do, so I did it. And then when you start understanding why, then you could start playing with it. You know, you can start adjusting things here and there and hearing for yourself. It's like, well, do you like it or, you know, you don't like it? Because in the end, whether it falls into a theoretical, what's the word?
Spectrum.
Yeah, or template, regardless, if it sounds good to you, then there you go. And if it just happens to be some awkward thing, then great, you know. Because I'm of the belief, you know, of that simple thing, if it sounds good, it is good. You know, regardless of what it really entails theory-wise.
If I was to say you were not brought up learning, you know, taking lessons and going through all that, if you were to learn anything, I think it's more important to be able to read charts, to read chorded charts rather than reading note for note melodies or
Depends on your goal. Depends on your musical goal.
Right. Yeah, of course. But if you have you know, depends on your goal also, you're going to want to learn. If you're just like, well, I got to learn something, I think probably go towards the chart reading and knowing the chords first before you learn how to read note for note a chart like that, because you're more often, first of all, going to get a chart. You're not going to be, I mean, how often have you guys been handed, you know, actual melodies to play and sight read, you know, that have 16th notes and 8th notes? And all that?
The last reading gig I had with you, but it was in a bass clef playing bass. That kicked my butt. But,
okay. What was before that, though? How long had it been?
Yeah.
But more often you get charts, right? Or you get thrown chords out at you and you have to write the charts. Like, oh, here's what the chord progression is going to be.
In fact, when I teach, the very first lesson just happens to be on the keyboard because it's a visual tool that people recognize. You know, it's easy to see the visual relationship between the notes. So, and the people who are, I mean, and that goes for everybody, understanding the note relationship. But when the people who really, really want to learn, then from that, I go into chord construction. Start with the major scale, and then I show how these chords are built. And then when you see it all relating to one thing, then it's almost like, oh, okay, it's not really that difficult to understand.
Yeah, the piano is a great place to start in terms of, I think, reading music. I think it's a great place to start. Even
understanding music, even if you don't want to read, if you understand the note relation or the intervals, how far is one note to the next, and doing a change to one chord, well, what does that mean? You have a major chord, you move this one note, it becomes a minor chord. Those things are easy to understand if you approach it the right way. And for a musician, it's a godsend. I mean,
I almost think
really,
it's easier to understand after you have some familiarity with music and with your instrument and that. I mean,
I think so. Yeah.
recently learned more because I really didn't know anything to begin with. I guess it was, but by knowing the little bit I did know, but having played and go, this just sounds right. It made it easier to understand when somebody explained why it sounded right.
Yeah, I think also when I picked up the guitar at 15, I distinctly remember, and I love my guitar teacher, I always will, because I would go in and I'd bring in my iPod and I'd say, I want to learn this song. I want to sing it. I want to play it. Just teach me this song. And, he would give me tabs and scales and say, okay, but first we have to do scale. And I'd say, please, and he would try to implement some of the basic necessities in there, but he let me play. And at 15, you need to feel accomplished and feel like you're not just sitting there plucking away what doesn't sound like music.
You need to have fun.
You need to be, I needed to be able to play a full song and say, okay, I get what I'm doing. And now that I'm older, I'm starting to go back to my scales and say, oh, okay, this is kind of important. And now I do want to start soloing or do, cooler things on the guitar than just playing rhythm guitar. But I think you have to go at your own pace. If a teacher throws something theory, or even, when I went to college, I didn't go for music. I wasn't ready. I don't want to sit there through theory and end up hating music because it becomes a math problem, which I'm not good at math, so that's my issue. But for me, it's about you have to be ready and willing to accept the knowledge that is out there.
Yeah, because I think I'm sure we all know so many people that at one point has taken piano lesson, guitar lesson, violin lesson at some point in their childhood, but they didn't stick with it. It could be a million reasons, but I'm a lot of it, and from what I've heard, is just it wasn't interesting to them. It was one of those right. It was one of those chores that the parents made them do, and and I look at it as well. Maybe it was a bad timing or the wrong approach from the teacher as well.
Right.
Because the teacher can really affect
totally
what you feel about what you're doing.
Shout out to
I took piano lessons for a couple of years.
Who's your teacher?
Robert Lawson.
Okay.
He is awesome. Kay's music scene, that whole place. I go there all the time to get my
Where's that at?
Strings changed. It's Tampa and Van Owen. No, Victory. Sorry, wrong.
Oh,
just it's
for the people who
What city
don't
is it?
know. Who,
It's Reseda,
Reseda,
California.
yeah. Little plug there.
Little plug. Love them. Always will. Family owned, so.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm a big supporter of learning music theory, but you as an individual, you really have to find your way through it.
Totally.
You have to seek that out if you really want to learn and improve on your instrument. I totally support that.
And that's not to say that there aren't some very successful musicians who don't know any theory or being able to read or anything like that, because you can think of, Geddy Lee. He doesn't read it. Maybe I shouldn't say they don't know theory, but they're not formally educated. They still have made it to basically the top of the top.
But would you recommend that as for an up and coming student of music? It's not something I would.
I
think.
say, do you? You can't.
I was gonna say I don't know. Because maybe these are the people who took these piano lessons and were like, this isn't working for me. But they have stuff in their head. You know what I mean? But they're being boxed in, like I said, by these lessons or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's definitely do theory lessons. Right.
I totally agree with you. Do you? But I guess the way I look at it is, when I was hungry for music, no one was going to stop me from learning something. I would seek it out.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I look back, there are moments that I think, if only I found somebody to say this, 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 and this, I would have saved, years of, the difficult way.
Right.
But then again, that would have been I was hungry for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it depends on where you're at in your journey.
Yeah, I think so.
But I would definitely, try to encourage that, You can't ram it down because you can tell when somebody's not feeling it, or you get that glazed look.
My guitar teacher, you would know.
Yeah, I think you know that. But as far as I wouldn't suggest not, or I should say, sheltering them from that.
Yeah.
Like go out there and figure your musical life.
I wish so bad I would have been in like my high school band, but it just wasn't. I guess it wasn't cool. Maybe in my high school, I don't even.
Yes,
know
it was.
why.
Damn you!
You were in band.
He was in band.
I will defend.
I don't know
band.
that you could have played
Concert
sports
band.
and that, like, it just wasn't. And I wish so bad I would have been in my high school band. So, I think that you can learn a real foundation in your school music program, and to keep up with it. And I certainly regret not doing that or taking other opportunities that I had when I was young to learn more theory and how to read. I would really recommend it for people who are serious about music.
And I've alluded to this before earlier, was about it's the teacher's approach. The teacher's approach is so critical, where and everybody has a different approach. Like I've substituted for teachers, and I would talk to the student and see how it's going for them. What are they learning? And I would feel like, oh wow, I'm stepping into the situation that if I taught the way I teach, I'm going to just totally take this student off course of what, where he has been going. And it's like, I'm substituting. Do I have the right to do that? I don't, it didn't feel
That's why
right.
if I substituted, I was like, hey, everybody jam session. That's all we're doing today. Play whatever you want.
Because we're, as individuals, and especially, in this creative medium, of music, it's such a hard thing to say, this works for everybody. It just doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a teacher needs to find what clicks for a particular student.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Good little discussion about that. I'm glad we talked about that. It was burning me up inside.
Yeah.
Wondering what the pros and cons were. I don't know.
yeah, but on that, so it's like, well, what are the opportunities like nowadays? I mean, you have online resources. You still have the public library. Yeah, that's still an option, but you have so many other avenues.
Oh, you got
You
Google.
mean
What
to
else
learn?
do you need? You got Google and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a tremendous resource right there to learn anything. But I mean, musically, you can sit down and whether it be like you want to learn how to play a particular song on the guitar, you can probably find a YouTube for that. To you want to know what the circle of fifths means, you can probably find a YouTube for that. It's just like
on learning songs, it's a great shortcut, but you've got to consider the source because there's a lot of stuff on there that it's just plain wrong.
True.
So and
true. Anybody with a camera
yes.
can post to YouTube. You don't need any credential.
I mean, anybody with some recording gear could do a podcast.
Yeah.
I know.
So use that.
Crappy one at that. Oh my God, I'm not talking about. Yeah.
Hey, you guys want to talk? Hey, let's record this.
But one thing I would say is, you can find all that stuff on Google or on YouTube, but you still have to have a lot of self-discipline too, because it's not just enough to learn real quick and go, okay, I get it now. I mean, there is a lot of work and practice. We all know that. There's a lot. I mean, you got to practice your butt off to get things in muscle memory, into your working memory, into your long-term memory. And it takes a lot of discipline and practice. And if you're taking it upon yourself to do that, like on YouTube or something, if you're one of those people who needs somebody to push you, like, a teacher every week to go to lessons to make sure you practice and stuff like that. If you're one of those people who needs that and you're not doing that and you're just thinking, I'll just look up on YouTube, you might be one of those people who goes, okay, I'm kind of done with this. I'm over it. Even though you might want to do it, your mind is wandering other places and you're not getting the work in, and then you just start to lose it. You just got to be careful. It takes a lot of self-discipline if you're going to do it on your own.
But I do think too, kind of going back to the whole thing of playing music. For me, it's the whole spectrum. Every reason's a good reason. If you only want to come home, pick up your instrument and just noodle away on whatever, let's say the guitar or the piano, just for the sake of your own, recreation, fine. You know what I mean? If you're playing the song wrong, who cares? If you're getting some enjoyment out of it, that's, to me, completely valid. Now, if you're one of those types that you want to take it to the next step, you want to pursue a career, then yeah, of course, you have to really be disciplined, and you're going to be, it's not really a question of discipline. You're going to do it if you're going to do it. But also, I would say it's good to have people, to surround yourself with people who are doing these same things, because it could just be a fun thing for the moment. That, hey, you know what? I have my friend who plays, and we jam or we learn songs. Maybe you don't think you're great, but just that exercise of going through that can bring a lot of joy. And who knows? Maybe it just sparks enough of that inspiration where you know what? You do want to take it to the next step.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. And I played solo for all of my life. I've played, acoustic gigs by myself. And I've always wanted a band. I've craved having that backing, band for myself. And now that I found it, when we're in the rehearsal room and we're not practicing one of my songs and they're jamming out, I do feel a little hindered by the fact, oh, I can't jump in. Then, they shout out the chords to me and I can kind of pick it up. But now I'm like, okay, I'm in a solo, because we need to have battling solos going on. We need to I need to be more legitimate. So having people around you to push you or discipline you depends on the person for sure. But for me, it's definitely a kick in the right direction if someone's one-upping me a little bit. I'm like, wait a minute.
I think it's good for all musicians.
Yeah.
And it's good to find, I guess in anything, but in particular with music, it's good to find somebody or to play with people who are just a little bit better than you.
Yeah.
Just to kind of give you that little extra motivation. It's like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Or I want to participate in that. I think it's a good thing.
Totally.
Yeah, so you go home and you practice your butt off so that the next rehearsal you're just a little bit closer. Yeah.
Well, it's just one of those things. We talk about going to see artists that you really, really admire, or some amazing virtuoso. There's two schools of thought, right? You go to their show and you think, number one, oh my God, that's incredible. I should just quit. Or number two, where it's just like, oh wow, I just can't wait to get home to practice. I can't wait to get home to pick up the instrument.
Or you're sitting there hoping they hit a bad note. So you'd be like, ha ha, yeah, right. Yes. They're like me too.
You're evil.
I do that all the time. I'm like, ooh, was that flat?
Meant to do that.
Yes, I've seen the best in the world mess up on stage.
No one.
You have never
is
seen
perfect.
me mess up, Francis.
Well, it goes
How
without
dare
saying,
you.
Rich, come on. I gotta make you appear human.
All right.
No, it's
I'll play along.
totally humbling when you see the person you admire most, that even if they forget one of their own lyrics that you have memorized. I've seen that multiple times. I'm like, dude, how are you sing the first verse twice? I'm like, how did you do that? How do you? But it's they're caught up in it, and it just proves that there's no science. There probably is. I don't know. I didn't take music theory, but there's no science to playing. It's just you have to feel it.
And that's one of the things about music as an art form. I know we're getting all crazy directions here. Yeah, but that's fun. Totally love the whole concept of, for example, painting. You can't, sure, you can try to recreate the painting, but music is this living thing that you wrote a song, or somebody wrote a song and you interpret it another way, but it's still that song. Mm-hmm. And you could still get a good vibe from it, or a completely different interpretation of it.
Well, that goes back to the YouTube thing, like you were saying. I have on my YouTube channel a bunch of covers, and how I figure out how to play those is either I hear it and figure it out if I can't find a tab that I like, or find a tab that has a capo, switch it up a little bit, and then interpret the song the way I hear it in my, Alexa Merrill sound, how I think my music would sound if it were a song that I were singing. So YouTube is a great avenue for things like that. Even if it's not necessarily the correct way to play it, you might hear it in a different light that you're like, oh, that's a cool version of it.
I absolutely love YouTube. For a variety.
I thought you were going to say me. I was like, oh, thanks. I absolutely love you. It's like, cool.
Obviously now it's baited. I can't say because it's baited now. It has to be. Oh, well,
wait for it.
We'll wait for it.
Wait for
it. Why? I said that because as you were talking about the interpretations, I look up songs. I look up backstage moments. I look up gear reviews. I look up. Just within music, I could just go on forever.
Mhm.
But beyond music, of course, all the crazy stuff out there. But just within music, there's so many things.
So much. I saw Jay-Z in the studio, my producer, when we were making this last record. He was trying to tell me that I need to be more like Mariah Carey, which Mariah is my vocal idol. And she can go into the studio and she knows immediately after she sang the note during the take, wait, I want to go back to this part, change this thing. And he's like, you need to be more like that if you want me to keep changing things, because we're not redoing the takes over and over. So he was making me watch this, and then somehow we got sidetracked to Jay-Z doing 99 Problems. And I was just watching it and my world was like exploding. I was like, oh my God. Like it's amazing. The things you can
Was
find.
that the one that, and Rick Rubin saying that
Yes.
this guy, he doesn't even write it down.
Yeah. It's all
He's
in his
just-
head.
Yeah, I
Yes.
saw that one. That was really cool.
It was insane.
Jay-Z doesn't write it down,
He doesn't write it down.
so he's
It's just
he's
it's just-
freestyling. He freestyling.
well,
I don't think he freestyles.
it's not freestyle,
Oh,
but at
it's
least
just
it's
written,
written
but
in
it's-
his head, and he
okay.
knows what he's going to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Everybody's got their own way. Everybody's got their method, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't have a method.
Which is
Having
a
no method
contradicted
is your
myself, right?
We're right there. I love you, Alexa.
There you go. Now you found reason to say it.
So what else we got?
I thought you had a topic, Francis.
Yeah. I'm going to go to bed.
I
Wrap
actually
this up.
do. We have time for another quick topic?
No, what you got? Sure.
This is we're all going to come from different angles here. Alexa, you're a solo artist and you have recently started with a backing band.
Yes.
I assume though that you are 100% in control of all your creative everything is all you, or have you started to accept?
I love my boys. I think that first of all, they're so talented, which you guys will be able to see if you come to the show. Next, December 9th at Molly Malones at 8:00.
We'll be there.
They are just phenomenal musicians that I literally sent them the songs, and we went in for the first rehearsal ever, and they knew all. They were telling me, no, you change the chord here. Oh, you do a break here. I was like, oh, man, I don't even know my own stuff. But they're so talented that I am fully open to anything they have to say. My drummer went to Berklee College of Music, so I automatically was like, you're going to be a musical director. He's like, absolutely not. This is your band. You have to tell us where we're going. But I let everyone have their input. We talk about from how to start the song to how to end the song and the dynamics in between, and do we feel like there should be a guitar solo, a bass solo, things like that. And they, squirm up a little bit and say, I don't want to do a solo. I don't want to do it. And I'm like, please do something, except for my guitarist. I'm like, just shred the whole time. That'll be fun. But I used to be very guarded with my music. No one could hear it. No one could have any input, because I was also building a sound and figuring out what I was. And now I feel like I've honed that. I kind of get who I am as an artist. Now I need different inputs, different ears, and say that I can accept or reject. And so
And you'll still be you.
it's still me. So a lot of times in rehearsal, we're just going over things, and someone will say, I think you should just end with just you singing. I never thought of that. I thought we were going to ring out. That sounds really cool. Well, you ring out on a lot of the songs. Having someone else there to even mirror what you've done before brings a lot of things to light. So I accept it for sure.
Right. But ultimately, you have final say in what
yeah.
you and your band is going to sound
Yeah, like us covers, they get so mad because I'm like, no, we're doing this. And they're like, we are not. I was, yes, we are.
Where's he going?
But that's
Where's he
understood.
going with this question?
Right, exactly. But that's understood from the very beginning. Well, so what I mean is understood from the very beginning that you are the one who calls the shot. Okay, so maybe you haven't experienced what some of us have experienced, which is being in a band when it starts out, let's say, as kind of a democracy, where there's no solo artist, it's no particular. You kind of start off in a democracy, and then over time, somebody in the band maybe tries to monopolize.
Guilty. Actually, go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, somebody, one way or another, tries to exert a little more influence, maybe passive aggressively sometimes, and it starts to kind of move away into out of the comfort zone into a what's going on here kind of thing. I thought we had, so in those kind of,
Oh, what happened? Did somebody's mic? I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that probably happens a lot more than not. It probably happens a whole lot. So in that situation, what do you do? How do you handle something like that when you're in it? Or
You become
what
a
do you do?
solo artist.
I have a couple thoughts because of course,
And I'm not talking about anything specific. I'm
I-
just
I
bringing it
know.
up as a
Francis.
general topic.
I know, but here's the thing. Well, first of all, the three of us, we all get along, and
When
with
we
that,
have to.
yeah, when we have to. but there is a part of it that I do believe, that things can start out as a democracy, but I think to really move forward or keep the band moving forward, I do think there needs to be somebody taking the lead somewhere. And if you're not feeling that direction, then maybe it's time to step out of that vehicle, of the band. But I do think when it's a pure democracy, that's when things can get bogged down of, things. It's hard to progress because you're waiting for everybody's input.
Mm-hmm.
And that can hold the band back sometimes. I think eventually somebody needs to take charge. And if everybody's in agreement with the approach and the direction, then all's good. And if not, got to move on.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree. I think that you can have, and I just think it's bound to happen in every band
Yeah.
ever.
I was going to say there's natural leaders.
Yeah, there's just going to be somebody who steps up and says, hey, let's do this. I think your approach to how you do it is one thing. I think if you're all on the same page, it makes it easier. If it's a completely different musical direction, I'm with Francis. You gotta say, well, this might not be it for me. But in general, sometimes, the most talented people are the least decisive people. So it's not even always necessarily a talented thing. I've known plenty of cats who are super uber talented who couldn't lead a band, couldn't book a gig, couldn't call songs, couldn't talk to an audience. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so some of those cats, you can't put all of them in the band together because they're going to be sitting in the basement.
What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Yeah. Just making YouTube videos, I
And
guess. I don't
discussing
know.
music theory in the corner.
Yeah. So I'm in agreement that somebody's got to be the leader, but
Yeah.
how that comes about or how they approach it, or I think that's to me the bigger issue. Not if it happens, but how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know what? And there, I don't think there's a formula that you can say you do X, Y, Z, and this will all work out.
Yeah, no.
These, being in bands, it's like being in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Every individual brings their uniqueness, and it's gonna work or it's not gonna work.
You've had some fabulous analogies tonight. First it was the toolbox, now it's the relationship. Just a wealth of.
I just stepped back and I saw it.
He's a man
Yeah.
who's seen some things.
I've seen some things.
He's seen some things.
Yeah, I agree with 100%. I do. I mean, like somebody to step up and kind of lead the direction, I think is definitely a good thing. And I agree with you, Chris, about it being just how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess the bottom line is just overall communication with each other.
Yeah.
Just like in Francis's relationship analogy. So yeah, just communicate with each other, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here's the thing: you can respectfully disagree with people, and that's sometimes hard. And I get it, especially sometimes the more familiar you become with each other, the less respectful you are to each other in a band, and the less tolerant you are of each other. So try to keep that in mind when you're communicating. And somebody remind me of this.
Let's keep that on a sample somewhere so we can just play it back to Chris every once in a while.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to have it on my iPod.
There you go.
If we're jamming, I was like, hold on, Chris. Hold on. All right. What do you say? What do we call this one?
Yeah, let's call this one. Okay, so that's
That's a way to keep it
a
flowing.
way to
Yeah,
keep
we
it
need
flowing.
like a
Flowing right
segue
out
out
of
of here.
I know a segue. Wednesday, December 9th, Molly Malones, 8 o'clock. You should be there. It's going to be ridiculous. Alexa Merrill.
Oh my god,
Like,
I need to film that for my
killing it.
Instagram.
There you go. Yeah. I'm actually very excited. This is gonna be our first time seeing you live.
I
Yeah.
know. And you
So-
guys, the band, like I was saying, it's a whole other experience. I mean, it's just so much fun. I can't wait for you guys to see it.
Yeah. very
Be
excited.
there.
We will
Stoked.
Definitely.
And
be
if you
there.
forget, just go to alexamero.com.
Exactly. I love it. I don't have to do any of the work tonight.
Awesome.
Bam.
That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, and by the way, we have this podcast called Tune Up and Jam.
Oh,
So
Do
you
we?
gotta, yeah.
oh,
Do we have a
cool.
website?
TuneUpandJam.com, or find us on iTunes. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Because if you find us on iTunes, you don't have to keep going to the website. You could just go to iTunes and subscribe. Then when you subscribe, it'll always be available to you.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Bam.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Later, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.